Welcome to NeuroNoodle's Neurofeedback and Neuropsychology Podcast, featuring tech legend Jay Gunkelman. He's the man who has read well over 500,000 brain scans, and Dr. Mari Swingle, author of iMInds. Our goal is to provide information and promote options for better mental health. The NeuroNoodle Podcast is supported by listeners and businesses just like you. You guys ready for Suisun? Suisun.
Dude, I still don't know how to say that. I think we should spend the episode talking about that. How do you actually
it's Suisun.
pronounce?
But let's talk about that PTSD article.
Which one?
FDA approved it. Neurofeedback for PTSD.
Oh wow!
I think that's
FDA clears neurofeedback intervention for PTSD. Look at that. Bodid Kraft, co-founder and CEO of Grey Matters Health. This is from July 20th. So that's 2 weeks.
Yeah. Ruth
Is it Ruth Lanius' thing?
No, but she's obviously the one that's been talking it up. Canada's way ahead of us.
Have you had her on the show yet?
Ruth, yeah.
Nice.
Her and Seaburn.
Cool.
And it's Mari. Mari.
Mari.
Hey,
Mari
you've been
Swingle.
practicing.
Mari.
Yeah, let me just get things in order here.
Mari, I've been reading your book, and I've been, one of my colleagues, shout out to Katya Zlatkova, she just got her QEGT certification.
Great.
She recorded pre, during, and post on an individual who was watching YouTube shorts on her phone.
Yep.
And we looked at the EEGs, and it was interesting. I was thinking of you, changes in, basically like it was a total disconnect frontal lobes.
Yep.
Like this person just had alpha everywhere frontally. They also had a very unique and sort of not a typical brain. So they weren't the great, interesting subject. They had a lot of beta spindles like at baseline. It's cool what you're doing. I'm loving the book so far.
Great. No, thanks. No, the the deregulation of alpha is your primary marker that there's too much. So, yeah.
I hear the book sales have gone up ever since you came on the show, Mari.
Oh, have they now? Wonderful.
That's what I heard. In an extra
Great.
quarter.
Yeah, that's about it with books.
So did you see that?
That's the obvious, yeah.
Jay will pop in whenever he pops in, but Mari, did you see that article on PTSD?
No.
Nikki, tell us about this article.
Well, you just told me about it, Pete. So
I know now.
Way to defer responsibility.
We're paying it forward.
No, I'm very excited. I'm just reading about it now. Apparently, this the first thing that came up was Psychiatric News, Volume 58, Issue 8 from August 1st. Apparently, there's something in here about the approval of neurofeedback by FDA for PTSD. I haven't found the section within this issue about that, but that's what a news article is quoting anyways. So
we'll post a link to the article, and hopefully now one day insurance will pay for it.
Yeah.
That should be a good sign, right?
We've known for ages and ages and ages, the blunting of alpha. That's your PTSD, air quote signature. When you see that, you have unprocessed trauma. I don't know why this has not become, not just on the radar, but the number one treatment. There's so much we can do when we see that signature. And to us, it's black and white. Two people have been through the exact same horrendous scenario, and one gets marked with PTSD and the other one, doesn't. It's a processing issue, right? It's not how severe the event was, it's how your brain was capable of, again, I'm going to air quote, getting over it, because I hate it when not necessarily therapists, when family members and friends say, just get over it. The brain is clogged. The brain is the crank has stopped. It's nothing you can, well, I'm not going to say nothing you can do, but you need some help. If you have that alpha slam, that alpha blunting.
So you mean you can't just talk therapy your way through it every time?
Now, what a question. No. Yeah, no, when you have that that affect or effect, the alpha blunting, these are the clients that do not respond to talk therapy. There's a a neurological blockage going on. There's an electrical signaling that needs help to unstick. Now, complementing with talk therapy, you bet. But my experience when we encounter this, no talking.
Well, that's
Most
all that
people.
talk therapy is, right? You just compliment them and say really nice things. Oh, you're so
Oh,
beautiful and intelligent and resilient.
well,
It comes,
I mean, I know we're being a bit humorous and facetious, but there's some truth to that. You hold somebody's
Okay.
hand, right? But which is fine if all they need is hand holding. And for some people, that's all they need. They need to feel validated, heard, handheld, and on they go. I'm not against talk therapy if it works. But as I said, when you have this cog in the brain, when you have that alpha blunting, in my experience, excuse me, it's not going to work. So that's where, Pete, I think I've talked about this before. I use, vicious sexual assault on females. They've told their stories so many times, and they can't process it. And each time they tell their story, they get mentally reassaulted. It's harmful. It's hurtful for them to retell their story. So they come into me and other qualified neurotherapists. I say, you don't have to say a word. I know you've been through something. I know you've been through something really severe. Let's get you hooked up. Help with the alpha release. When and if you would like to talk, I'm here. And I give them, free liberty. I said, if I see you come on my roster for a 1-hour counseling session, I know what's up. And generally speaking, somewhere between 6 and 10 sessions, this happens. The person comes in and it's like this purging, this vomiting of the story with emotionality, and they're done. It's released. That's the verbal trauma release. There, I'm not really counseling. I'm the last witness of the PTSD.
well, the military's been using it for a while, and it's been working for our vets. So
yeah,
you would think eventually, and then we've had Ruth Lanius on the show from Canada, and she is one of the leaders in PTSD. We'll put a link to the show right here. Yeah. She's been talking about it a long time. Oh, you got the moves there, John Travolta. Yeah. You do look like John Travolta now, Nikki. I like this look, man.
Really?
I
don't get John Travolta ever.
Well, you did today.
That guy from Scrubs, Zach Braff. I get Christian Bale, but that's a little flattering, I think.
Well, that's our subscribers just went up. So Nikki, give us our background. Tell us about yourself. I really want to hear about Suisun City, the whole 9 yards. What's been going on with you, my friend?
What's been going on? When did we last talk? What is it?
About a year ago.
I just want to say, to close the loop on the conversation with Mari, I don't want to be throwing therapy under the bus. And actually, my partner is a psychotherapist.
Way to cover yourself,
and, yeah. Don't get mad at me. I see a lot of, should we do therapy or neurofeedback? And I'm like, well, we can do both. They don't contradict each other necessarily. They're supportive of each other, and we can get better results from our talk therapy when we liberate the brain patterns, and vice versa. Some people who are doing neurofeedback would benefit from some time verbally processing what's going on.
100%. I don't think any of us disagree, but I think the EEG can help inform the balance of what type of complementary therapies, including talk forms. Hello, Jay.
Howdy.
Jay Gunkelman. Say hello to Nicky Whittredge. I think you know him.
Just a touch, yeah.
He was the old guy who wouldn't get off the stage at the last Suisun Summit.
That's me.
He was the one without a PhD, no credentials. He's just up there talking.
What the hell is anybody listening to me for?
So Jay, what we what we're talking about is that article on PTSD and the FDA. That's pretty huge, isn't it?
Yeah. Give me a moment. Yeah, and he's tucked up next to me here on the couch. So, well, on the
beautiful
kind of double wide chair.
Share the story. You got a new pup.
Yeah, we had to put down our 14-year-old Vishla, unfortunately, and it's devastating. And we realized we kind of needed a pup. So, and Renita had looked about 4 or 5 years ago when Sam had a bit of a health crisis. We thought we may have to find another dog, and she looked and kind of like Ridgebacks, and so we. About a week after the passing of Sam, she found one for rescue in Southern California. So a day's drive down out into the middle of the nowhere and eastern edge of Southern California, and then drove him home on a Sunday, or done Friday, back Saturday. Sunday was really the first day, a little over a week ago, that we had him, and he's well-intentioned and real calm. And unfortunately, he doesn't snore, so nobody's going to know that he's on my lap, typically. Sam snored. Everybody who consulted with me knew Sam was on my lap because he was snoring. So, anyway. But, Suisun City was fun, and I was on the stage a fair amount, but I did share it with others, that there was a certain amount of demand to have me up there. So,
Was there now?
no accounting for taste,
Well, it'd be nice if we knew somebody that had something to do with the Suisun City deal in October. You know anybody, Jay?
I think there's a planning committee out there somewhere. Nicky's involved in, Sherry Johansson. Go ahead, Nicky. Just tell him the grinding detail of the planning. It's always.
Yes, it's terrible. We have to meet all 4 of us, great friends, and talk with each other over Zoom. It's great trial and tribulation. Someday they'll build a statue for us or something for all our suffering. But yeah, no, it's been exciting. We have an even more stacked list than last year, and a
so
really
this is a gathering. This is a gathering in October.
The gathering. It's a place you, the person listening to, could even be at in person. In fact, there's still tickets left.
I'll be pulling up with my GoPro.
Yeah, Pete's gonna be there.
Park next to the bar.
Maybe be there.
Mari's hoping to be there. We're moving the clinic. We've been in our location for 25 years. And oh my, talk about going through history. So, but I would love to be there. I hope to be there.
Yeah. Well, it would be fun. I can't travel, so basically around my birthday, this would be what I think the 4th time I've had an event like this, but 3 of them more formal. And we just take over the yacht club, which is big enough to hold 80 people comfortably, and the audiovisual people, and have it enough of an open air sort of a setting so you don't feel like you're in a
sauna,
super spreader event or something. We did have major speakers, Rusty, Ron. That the content was not anything to disparage last year, but this year we've got Dirk de Ritter, MD, PhD, neurosurgeon, and neuromodulator, and generally fun guy. And he's going to pop in I think he's coming in from Belgium on his way to New Zealand. He works in both places. Quite a commute, but I'm an old friend of his, and asked him to pop in, and he said anytime. So we have him in for this, and Martijn Arns from Europe, and all over. Martijn does the educational programs for NeuroCare Group, which is out of Munich, and they do TMS, neuromodulatory techniques, TDCS, and their practice management. They buy clinics and pay off the owner and hire the owner to run it, not to do the advertising and management or anything. They handle that. The therapist basically just does the therapy and doesn't have to worry about where the clients are going to come from and all that. They manage the clinics, and they've cherry-picked all the really major clinics in Australia. They've hit a lot of major ones in Europe. They've picked up a handful of them here in the USA already. And that, there are predatory groups that want to kind of dumb down your protocols to make it easy to manage or something. And they don't even make you have to own the equipment that they would end up having themselves. They basically, if you have a TMS machine, you don't have to buy one that they tell you to use. If you have a neuromodulatory technique, you can continue to use that. They're old money in Europe. They're not venture capital in the same way normal venture capital is. So, if your spreadsheet doesn't look good for the quarter, it doesn't change their 5-year plan. So it's an interesting group. I'm retired, so I'm not a candidate for them picking anything up. But they're old friends of mine, and I know the quality of their work. Martijn is if you look at the list of publications under his name, it goes on an arm and maybe a leg long.
There are a few, aren't there?
Yeah, and they're really quality papers. It's easy to just turn out a little super simple thing, but he does complex papers and meta-analyses. He's worked with Sandra Liu for meta-analysis on neurofeedback for ADD, ADHD, and meds, showing actually that ADD was equal to or better than meds. And that's UCLA psychiatry department for Sandra Liu. And then obviously Martijn is an old friend of mine, because when I wrote the phenotype paper, he read it and thought, damn, I don't have to worry about diagnosis. This frees me up to work with people without having to worry about the DSM being outside of a realm of something that I could work with, or something I can work with the EEG and the phenotypes. And he tested it. It was a retrospective paper. He's a good scientist. And he looked and said, well, we have to prospectively validate it. And I would be invited over to a lecture, and I'd walk in the door, and there'd be a stack of EEGs and QEEGs for me to go through, and that'd end up being a publication. How does the phenotype predict stimulant use in ADD was the first one. After that, we did one on depression with 126 depressed and matched controls. Big papers. We had met at a BFE meeting, and actually were assigned to kind of babysit, make sure Dirk got back to the hotel. It was kind of a loose social event, and Barry Sturman kind of had to quit consuming and get back to the hotel before he fell over. And our assignment was to get Dirk back to the hotel, and so we were hanging around Dirk talking, and Dirk asked the both of us, "Do you drive a car?" And yeah. Well, do you have a license? Well, of course. Do you have a license to practice, what you're doing here? And Martijn took that seriously, and he actually got his PhD off of that. Now, he did a PhD that's like 5-in-1, and I get consulted on PhD stuff by students all the time. what do I do for my PhD? And I always try to cut it down, make it something you can actually finish and graduate. Don't solve all of neuroscience in your damn project. Leave some for the next guy. So yeah, he didn't listen to that. Yeah, and he published a small book as his dissertation with really 5 separate projects in it. But that's him. I mean, he takes on gigantic tasks and polishes them off, and in a way that's really hard to replicate. So having him there is going to be a real hoot. And again, he's really down to earth, easy to approach. There's no, space skivvies where you think your ass is out of this world or something. So he's a real solid guy. So people are easily able to approach him and ask questions, and he's got a lot of answers. I've got to say that. So,
Nicky, when is this event, Nick?
So we are starting on the Thursday, the 12th of October. We're asking people to arrive Wednesday. We have our check-in at 8:30 on Thursday, with Jay speaking at 9, and Dirk speaking at 11. So it goes from Thursday through Saturday, and then Sunday morning, just like last year, we're going to have a group discussion. Last year, we had Dr. Regine Eichler-West organizing our publication, which is in Neuroregulation, if you want to check that out, see what the last year's summit was about. And this year, I'm going to be facilitating that along with Sherry. So we're going to do another publication this year, and we encourage people to book their flights later in the day on Sunday or even on Monday, especially if they're interested in that part of the summit, which is a really special and cool part. It's cool to have a lot of fun over a weekend and then get to sort of get in your group of people who are interested in the same similar thing you're interested in and write something up about it and get published.
From a guy that just sits at the bar and peeks in with his GoPro, seems to me like it's the upper echelons of neurofeedback people that all get together, and you do consume the information, I'm guessing, from Martine and Dirk, but when you guys go on break or at night, you all get together and you share information. I think the networking piece and sharing the knowledge is a big part of it. Is that right, Jay?
Yeah, and it's quite a network to tap into. Quite honestly, most conferences that you go to, the person on the podium is presenting stuff that's 2 or 3 years old because they had to be found and invited, which means they had to have published or somebody has to have known about their work. So it's got to be at least a few years old for people to know and to invite them. So where do you get the newest stuff? Oh, in the hallway, on the breaks, in the bar, out on a walk. The fun thing about this little teeny tiny town that I'm in is it's all walkable. The yacht club, the hotels, the downtown with the restaurants are all easily walkable. This isn't something where you gotta get an Uber to go 5 miles to go to a restaurant or something. It's a quiet little town. You can cross the street without worrying about being run over. You'd be lucky to see a lot of cars go by. So, and the yacht club is really a nice facility. We're going to do a real good dinner and party. After all, it's my birthday event, and
damn straight.
If I can't throw, and nobody pays for the party. I know there's a lot of meetings you got to pay extra to go to the party or something. I'm putting on the party. This is not a big out of your pocket thing.
Great music too.
Well, we intend to have fun and good science. And when I ran the meetings at ISNR 8 out of 10 years, I would plan a really good party and then invite my neuroscience friends from all over the world to come over and party with us. And oh, by the way, you got to do a lecture, and it worked really well. I mean, the first year I did it, there was 75 paying people at the meeting in Aspen, 1997. And the last one I ran was in San Diego, and they had over 500. So, it grew. You've got money in your pocket enough to go to a couple of meetings a year, but not a lot more than that because you got to run a practice, So later in your life, you're going to have to make a choice of where you go. If you've had a really damn good time at one of the meetings and you've got a pan balance of which meeting you're going to go to, it's my vicious plan to classically condition people to like the event. And well, I'm just a nasty guy. So it's all these vicious plans of treating students really well so they like the meeting and the society and that sort of thing.
Nicky, how did you get started in neurofeedback? Because it seems to me you were a student working your way up, and all of a sudden now you're planning the Suisun City Summit. Say that 3 times fast. What is your background for the new users and listeners and viewers that are checking us out right now?
Yes, for the new neurofeedback users. Drug reference. Yeah, I mean, your own podcast has them on here. It was like I got connected with Pete Jansons pretty early on, and I don't think you've had Douglas Daly on, but yeah, I was a DIYer. I found out about it on Reddit, on the Joe Rogan Experience, and had some issues I wanted to work on, and wanted to try something different than the traditional psychiatric medication route. And fumbled around with technology that I had no clue how to use for a solid 3 to 4 years, and then realized that it would be helpful to consult with some people who knew some things. And that's how I found Pete, and later on got connected at the Neurofield conference immediately before COVID. Like weeks before COVID hit was the first in-person conference I went to. And that was just exuberant, finally connecting with the nerds who were nerds like me. And got to meet Joe Castellano, RIP. Joe passed a couple of years ago, but was very much a connector and a champion of people with his level of passion, which I had, although not his level of expertise. And he got me connected with Jay, and he started a study group, which still lives on today, the Onto Innovations group. Onto Innovations / Back to Basics was kind of the title, I think, of one of the original Suisun Summit events, which I wasn't there for. I've been doing the grand rounds with Jay, also with Dr. Mari Tracy through EEG Strategies. And I've been working with Yuri Kropotov as well on sort of his methodology for interpreting ERPs and looking at EEG data. So
yeah,
I'm just a student, and I think it's a lifelong endeavor being a student, and I hope to never stop.
Well, it's a mountaintop that has no top. It's a learning curve that keeps going up. Once in a while, you see somebody who says they're standing on the top, and you got to kind of steer away from them. That it's an unknowable topic. You can have a good piece of it and find other people that have pieces of it and network, and that's the only solution. A brain can't hold inside of itself an understanding of the brain. That's impossible. But a network of brains can hold inside the network a definition of a brain. So you just have to create a network of like-minded individuals that have, depth in, adjacent areas or overlapping areas, and form a network of folks that you can consult on. I've got questions about nutraceuticals or something. There are people I can talk about that with. It's not something I have to know myself. And there, every silo next to every other silo is so deep, it's pretty hard to know them all. And one of the best things I know about Dirk is that I've never found a topic that he doesn't go deep in. There's a lot of people in the field who know their area, but as soon as you start to talk about something a little outside of their specialty, they don't have that depth anymore. And Dirk is as deep and wide as anybody I've ever met. So, but he's a unique character and has done a lot of validation studies for the infra-low frequency folks, and he's used machine learning algorithms to identify thalamocortical dysrhythmia, one of the topics he'll be talking about, which is a cross-frequency coupling, actually neuroplasticity gone awry, like phantom pain, tinnitus, movement disorders, reward deficiency things, including eating disorders, some forms of affective regulation, OCD.
All the toughies.
Yep. And then he's also going to be talking about the triple network and the dynamics between the default and the salience and the executive network. Those three networks dynamically run the brain in a large way, and understanding the how to flip between default and salience using neuromodulation. And that's a big one. You can find somebody stuck in salience. You turn on the EEG, the eyes closed, and you see no alpha. They're still focused in salience. If they get tired, the little bursts of alpha happen, but that person's stuck, and you've got to be able to flip them out of their salience into default mode, so that when they close their eyes, they can actually be at rest, not still on. I mean, you should be able to idle and recover. Rest and recover is important, and if you're stuck in salience, it's pretty hard. And it's trauma will stick you in salience sometimes, and sometimes alter your default as well. So understanding those networks and the dynamics of them will be important.
You two are designing the party now, though. But if I could just make one little comment, going just a few comments back about one of the things I adore about our collective profession, and I also think why we attract so many good people, is it's always moving. If you expect to get your education, get your degree, get your equipment, and not learn anymore, you're in the wrong field. But we attract, and those people kind of drop out. But if you have that passion and that desire for continued learning and contribution, this is the field. And you mentioned, Jay, the community. That was immediately obvious to me and many others when you come to our conferences, you're invited in. It's not an issue to go and talk with the presenters. There aren't these nice little protective walls around people. People want to teach, people want to share, and that's beautiful. And I think, Jay, you're a leader in terms of making that part of the community. So thank you.
Well, as I say, I always planned a very good party, and that's a good way to mix groups. And if you party together, it's pretty hard to end up having that hard wall between the, people that believe this kind of feedback is the only thing to do, and the ones who think this kind of feedback is the only one to do. Pretty soon they are actually talking. Are you
saying on air that wine is the solution?
Well,
actually,
perhaps,
it is, yes.
Perhaps a little wine, perhaps a little bit of something else too. You never know.
Alpha training. Nick, you're a student.
I'm coming in soft with my comments here. So,
Nick, you're a student at Saybrook, and you have Saybrook University. You have University of Texas San Antonio with Mark's program. What do you see with the new kids on the block coming in, getting into neurofeedback? Are they starting off in psychology and then getting into neurofeedback, or like the other people that you're working with on the planning committee? I'm sure they're students as well. They were students.
Yeah. So on the planning committee, we have Rebecca Walker, who's actually now an alumna of Saybrook University. So hats off. to Rebecca. She's now working with the iSync folks, the iMedisync folks. And then it's Sherry Johansson, who runs Gray Matters Neurofeedback. So she's definitely a veteran in the field. But yeah, I mean, I have a very small corner of the world that I operate with, so I'm not going to speak for, all the students in the whole field. And, I think it is an interesting question. Demographically, the field is definitely represented by people who, oftentimes have had a first career in psychology or, talk therapy, and have, after they've sort of gotten their start in that, have then come to neurofeedback. And of course, the BCIA requirements, if you want to have that sort of clinician level of certification, in some sense, funnels people in that way. So I think, students in neurofeedback are coming from a lot of different places, and I think we need more places for students to come together. I mean, I want to, in some way, help contribute to that, like Joe did, to support students. And I'm starting my own podcast in the beginning of September to, try to highlight what some of the younger people are doing on the more kind of technical side of
what are they doing?
And,
that was the question. What are they doing?
Well, they're doing all
Break
sorts
it here
of stuff.
first,
I mean,
Nicky. Come on.
I think for one, people are trying to figure out how to get into the fields and if it's like a viable profession.
Is it a viable profession?
I think it totally can be, and I think a lot of the, the developments that are happening in the field are really encouraging. Like the fact that an article just came out and that the FDA is now, I don't want to have rose-colored glasses. I'm sure that insurance companies will still find a way to, deny coverage, but they're definitely encouraging trends. I think it still takes sort of like a savvy person to do neurofeedback well, in an ethical way, and in a way that is, supportive of like a business life. And some, obviously those things can be in tension with each other. So yeah, I honestly don't know. I don't have the answer. I've had some professional experience myself, and if there's one thing I've taken from that, is that there's a lot of different approaches to neurofeedback, and the younger generation is getting exposed to a level of education and a breadth of experiences and expertise that in some sense make them unideal candidates to work for other people. Because everyone has their own, passion and excitement about particular things. And it can be a tough pill to swallow that you're sort of working under someone else who wants to promote a particular style. So I don't have the answer. I haven't made it big in this field.
Well, here, I'll make an observation that I've seen is if you ask Dr. Mari, she'll say you got to get your psychology degree first, then learn your neurofeedback. Then you'll have the tech side. Oh, no.
No, I mean, I think if you're in your youth and you're just entering, go parallel. My beef is individuals who have no knowledge of anatomy, physiology, medicine, no knowledge of the brain, buying
you mean a psychologist,
hanging a shingle and calling themselves a neurotherapist, the alternative medicine. I mean, these are the people that can harm people, and obviously give our profession a really bad rap. I think if you want to get into this, you have to have a passion for people and a passion for the brain. If you're just in this for the money, no. Okay. But you also have to have a passion for learning, as we were saying, that the ball is always rolling and you want to be happily running beside it, learning about how it's moving. Yeah, you have to have passion. I'm repeating myself, but I mean, I think there are two types of individuals that are attracted to our practice, and one type, oh my gosh, we support. I mean, when I have a student contact me, I have no issue, spending Zooming, chatting, feeding their passion to see, so they can decide whether this is for them. But I have a big issue with people who self-label. Oh gosh, I'm going to say pretend to be to have the science and the knowledge, and who are not interested in acquiring it. Yeah, I think it's a simple one, but one of the things we also have to do is honor our beginnings. And Jay can perhaps speak to this because he's a living example. I'd say at the second beginnings, so this would have been, late 70s, early 80s, a whole bunch of people with passion.
Yeah.
And I think that was the central component, the central juice. And some people had, wallpaper up the yin yang, in terms of the qualifications, and other people didn't. But everybody had a passion for learning, a passion for sharing. And I think people also had a passion for, it wasn't about the money, it was about, doing no harm and helping people. Jay, do you want to go a bit further?
We've talked a little bit about the professional therapeutic psychologist, neuropsychologist, counselor, licensed approach. We also have people who use neurofeedback in sports performance, and that's a whole different branch. We're going to have Santiago Brown coming over from Singapore to do a talk this year at the Suisun Summit, and that again, it's a different approach. Sue Wilson, Vienna, Sue Wilson has been in that area of it for a long time. We go back so long ago together. It's Sister Sue and Brother Jay. We tease each other about coming from North Dakota and Montana. The two states always make fun of each other. They have joke books, same joke book, different label. But you also have people in the field that are into consciousness research and consciousness studies, and that's a real broad area. It's a tricky area because there are some people that are charging gigantic amounts of money to tell you can become like a Zen master in a weekend or something, and it's $18,000 later. After you spend that much money, you better think you got something out of it. But it's state versus content. I mean, you learn the state of a Zen master, perhaps, but it's not the content. You're not a Zen master at the end of the course, and the same one kind of meditation isn't necessarily good for everybody. There's concentrative meditations for those that are a little bit spacey or ADD. And there's transcendental meditations for those that are kind of overwrapped and need to kind of loosen up some. I mean, there's totally different approaches, and the people that are in that area have good depth. Richard Davidson's lab, having worked with the Dalai Lama's monks, have shown us that it isn't like the 70s. Jim Hart's PhD looking at alpha with Zen meditators. Well, it was still on paper. What do you get off of a paper EEG? Paper cuts. Ink on your clothes. I mean that. Until Davidson looked, they didn't think that gamma was part of meditation. It was consciousness. People kind of talked a little bit about gamma and binding and whatnot, but I'm sorry, but the old approaches were just missing the richness of the high end of the frequency range. And gamma on paper is not that easy. Gamma on paper is going to look kind of like 60 hertz thickening of the line unless you really speed up the paper. And in the United States, we didn't really ever make a machine that would go that fast, so you could see the gamma ripples. There was a a Swedish device called a Show. It could spit paper out as fast as you could run, and you could make a spike about 1.5 feet long. So it was a way to look at high frequency EEG stuff. And UC San Francisco Med Center had one for research experimental purposes. So yeah, the clinical people have great depth in that area. The consciousness people have better depth than they had before, but it's still an open area to kind of work around in. And obviously, sports ends up combining heart rate variability, peripheral to who? I mean, it's still biofeedback for the person. It's not. They don't consider it peripheral. It's still part of them. But EEG, electrodermal, heart rate variability, muscle, I mean, all together for sports. And it's integrating things like that end up making the sports physiology so important. And it's shown to be effective. I mean, for goodness sakes, the World Cup, the Italian team won after using the brain room or the brain stuff from Thought Technology. Canada won the Winter Olympics with really heavy-duty biofeedback, neurofeedback. The first gold medal from India was after a biathlon. They ski and then shoot. And to shoot, you have to slow down your heart rate and shoot in between beats. And HRV training with their biathlete, they got a gold medal after that. So the sports physiology application for biofeedback and neurofeedback is tremendous. And at this point, look at all the traumatic brain injury folks that can end up being benefited with training to end up helping to try and save the brains that have been battered. So, our field is as broad as your imagination can make it.
Jay, can you go into the PTSD article that just came out in the FDA? That was pretty huge, wasn't
it? Yeah, I haven't gone through the article itself, but they basically have seen the fMRI details. Thomas Ross and Ruth Lanius and their publications. PTSD and trauma are a big topic, and the effectiveness of neurofeedback in that area has basically been seen well enough by the FDA that they've approved it. Now, what else has been approved for neurofeedback for FDA?
ADHD.
That's it.
Migraine.
Relaxation. Alpha training for relaxation. If you're a manufacturer, that's the only thing you could talk about. Now, you could have an educational body that wasn't part of your company, and they could talk about all the clinical applications that we actually use, but the manufacturers were regulated by the FDA, and they could talk about relaxation. And they didn't really. They talked about their specs and whatnot, and they let the educational groups do the education about the clinical applications and other applications.
But Jay, this is pretty huge, right?
It is huge. The Alpha Stim group has a whole list of things that they're approved for, that they've done the research and publishes and applied through the FDA, and there's certain standards that you have to meet for the quality of the research. And I think if we had a manufacturer that had enough money that they thought they could get back from it, they'd push for ADD, they'd push for epilepsy. Those both have solid efficacy literature. The ADD, ADHD, affective regulation, those are getting to be probably efficacious and efficacious. The APB just came out with a brand new set of practice standard guidelines as to what applications have reached what level of support for efficacy. And I think they've got 40 something different clinical application areas that end up having their white papers or update on efficacy. That date goes way back. Don Moss was president of the APB. For some damn reason, I was president of ISNR. That every once in a while a group makes a mistake. So I was president of ISNR at the moment, and you hear somebody say, "Oh, I can treat that." Whatever the discussion was in the background, "Oh, I can treat that," and I'm thinking, based on what? Where's the research that can show that you can even think about treating that? I mean, you might consider that you're treating it, but we have to have standards for what we claim. You can attempt much, but claim little. And there was lots of claims and very little support. As an example, insomnia. Back at that time, people were saying, "Oh yeah, we can treat insomnia," and people were treating insomnia well with SMR and a little bit of beta sometimes. And but if you were called on the carpet in front of your licensing board and they asked for the efficacy literature, what would you hand them? Oh, Sturman found that if you trained SMR, the cats had a denser sleep spindle. That's cats. You can't use that for efficacy literature. Lubar had a toss-away discussion in a paper on ADD treatment for kids, and oh, by the way, they reported they slept better. Well, that's not efficacy literature. It wasn't until 2005 that Salzburg, Austria, turned out an insomnia paper with a control group, and it was replicated in Graz, Austria. At that point you have some control studies from a reliable, not a manufacturer, but from an academic center, and you wouldn't actually be drawn and quartered on the carpet that you were called on. You actually have some support for what you're claiming. So Don and I decided that we had to get both societies together to form a committee that would set up standards that we would have for our own applications, because the Chambliss criteria for APA was probably efficacious, and then specific, meaning it's better than any other approach as specific. Well, our techniques needed a little leg up. And so we put up possibly efficacious, then probably efficacious, then efficacious and specific. So that the ability to kind of step up on the hierarchy of quality of evidence was there. So Don and I formed a committee which didn't have us on it. We created an academic committee, and they came up with kind of like the Chambliss criteria. What kind of structure and what kind of study do you need to make a claim? And if it was anecdotes, it was still experimental. But if you had some randomization, some crude control, then you started to move up the hierarchy. And
Jay, the FDA, I mean, this is huge. Can we make a claim? Can we say treat? All those cautious words we've had to use in the past. Like what can we tell somebody about neurofeedback and PTSD? What is the language we can say now if the FDA is
the same thing that we have been saying, except if you're a manufacturer now, you can say it. The FDA regulates manufacturers and their claims, their written material and their device, and the records they keep about their device, and how they fabricate the device, and how they examine the parts that went into the device. They go through and make sure that your good manufacturing practice certification is still good, and you're still up to snuff on your standards of manufacturing. So they take care of the manufacturing. They do not control the clinician. The clinician can take a device and use it for something else. But a manufacturer can't make a claim. Now, and it's a little tricky. If I'm a manufacturer and I'm making a scalpel, but I'm calling it a screwdriver, oh, this is the intended use of this is as a screwdriver, but everybody who buys it uses it as a scalpel. The FDA is going to come to me and say, your intended application isn't the actual intended application, and you've got to meet standards for scalpels, not screwdrivers. So at some point, if the discrepancy between claims of relaxation only and that everybody uses it for lots of other things is so discrepant that they'll come in and start to look at it. Now, they may look at it and say, oh, well, okay, yeah, the ADD that you're doing is okay. We'll list that as well. But you pretty much have to apply and show them the research on it in order to get them to add a new tool to our tool belt, which has relaxation and PTSD in it right now. But we use the technique for everything it's used for, which is really quite a broad range. It's great the FDA opened up on PTSD, but it's a shame that we haven't pushed other applications like the Alpha Stim device has, because we have a long list that we could probably have.
What do you think would be next?
Epilepsy, ADD are the two with the strongest research behind them. After that, affective disorders. Obviously, PTSD has already made it in.
Can I ask a quick question? Because we're running out of time, Jay. If the efficacy is better for ADHD, why didn't that get approved before PTSD?
Application profile of somebody who's using it. I mean, they were using fMRI instead of EEG feedback.
Okay.
And Rebecca on the planning committee just went to a meeting on neuroimaging. There were thousands of papers. There's only a handful of on EEG. Who's there? FDA's there looking for clinical applications, and they've got thousands of papers to go over. And there's 5 of them over here on EEG. Must not be that important. So it takes time and investment by manufacturers to get things approved. It takes money to do that. Now, there's some corporations now, like iSync has got money. That they're not a bootstrap startup like all of my companies have been. They actually have millions of dollars in the bank from investors and
got out Dave Berkus.
Yeah, Dave Berkus, and they'll do an IPO at some point, and all the people who have little bits of that company are going to end up with a big chunk in their pocket, and they'll be even more well funded. But they're busy with high-level applications trying to predict Alzheimer's and dementia, mild cognitive impairment. I think it's an ideal approach for screening high school athletes and pro athletes. Actually, Becky Basham has gone to a high school somewhere in the Midwest, and she's doing EEGs, and somebody else is doing our ERPs preseason, and they'll do it again postseason. And these are high school. They're trying to track head injuries from that level, not necessarily even college and then pro, because it's the number of whacks and the significance of the whacks, and not just the fact that you got a significant concussion. There's a concussion protocol, but there's no protocol for the lineman who gets hit upside the head every damn play. Whack, whack, whack.
They become a podcaster. Dr. Swingle, did you have anything you wanted to say before we close out with Nick?
Yeah, I just wanted to make kind of a comment consolidating what Jay was saying, that I think the key thing in our field is that the weight of our practice. The technology and the clinician are equal. They have to work in tandem. And if we feel technology is going to do it all, no. And if you have a qualified clinician who thinks they can do it all without, knowing the technology, no. And I think we get ourselves in trouble when we forget about that really delicate interconnection of the knowledge and the technology. And as Jay said, sure, you can have it can be applied in education. So the knowledge then is educational. It can be applied in sports psychology. So then the knowledge is somebody who knows something about sport, somebody like myself, with psychology. So whatever that complement is of knowledge has to work with the technology.
Nick? So Nick, you've probably got some presenters that we haven't mentioned, like Ron Swasina, talking about meds and others. And any highlights that you think should be popped up as an also at the meeting?
Well, I'm just going to pop up one because we don't have time to talk about all of them, but it's a joint presentation by Michael Villanueva and Peter Gass, who are kind of like a clinical neurofeedback / computational neuroscience duo that really gave a beautiful and thought-provoking presentation last year called Art of Dimension, and another one, I'm forgetting the name of the other one, but they have a fascinating talk. They went down to Mexico and did EEG studies on a group that were undergoing 5-MeO-DMT treatments. So I don't know much about it other than the abstract that they submitted, but one of my favorite things about the conference last year was this sort of inclusion more of people who are coming from the more hardcore science, computational neuroscience background, and really bringing our worlds together. So I'm really excited for that this year. And
Nicky, you had me at hello. How do I buy a ticket? How do I get in? Where do I go? What do I do?
Yeah, so if you Google Suisun Summit 2023, you will see
use this link.
Yeah, or use the link in the video. It's being hosted on the Gray Matters Neurofeedback website, which is Jay Johansson's website. So check that out. We have less than 20 in-person tickets left. So it's filling up. We're capped at 80 hard because it's a yacht club. It's not a convention center.
Great bar.
It's a great time. Sign up, and there will be a live stream if you miss out on the in-person tickets. But I recommend
where's the live stream from last year? How do we get into that? Can we buy that now?
Yes, you can, and we're gonna put a link out for that as well. Dr. Mary Tracy handled that. I think it's just by emailing her currently, but but yeah, before this podcast goes out, we'll get a link to that. So that you can have somewhere to go for last year.
It's not free.
It's not free. No,
it's not free. We got to fund
it's quality.
It's
quality.
3 days of video. I think being there in person is so much more rich. You can ask your questions and interact face to face with all of these folks, and that it's not that easy to end up with that kind of a venue. It's a small, personal, intimate venue. It's not a giant lecture hall where you don't know who's sitting in 10, 15 rows over. Everybody's close, and we do have live stream that's going to be done as well. But watching video for 3 days isn't the same as being there. I mean, there's a certain amount of stimulation of having folks around and the break time and whatnot. It's important, and we also have a hell of a good party.
It's a networking, Jay. You don't get networking from the stream. It's so.
And if the prime rib dinner doesn't taste very good online, so.
The music's the same. Jay Gunkelman, Dr. Mari Swingle, Nicky Whittredge, thank you for another fantastic episode. The NeuroNoodle Podcast is supported by listeners and businesses just like you.